This episode brought to you by How to Write Manga, your complete guide to the secrets of Japanese comic book storytelling. Available wherever fine ebooks are sold.
The world has gone insane. Cosplayers rule the conventions. Gamers dominate the tabletop and the internet. Sci-fi subjugates the movies, and fantasy rules the bookstore with an iron fist. Only one group can bring order to this unruly mob. A team of uber geeks, masters of the nerdly arts, trained for decades in the hobby shops and basements of the nation. Mobilized by the secret masters, they are the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
Hello and welcome to the Department of Nerdly Affairs. I'm your host, Rob Patterson, here with my co-host, Don Chisholm. And Don is giggling like a schoolgirl because tonight we have an extra special guest. Larry Houston, director and producer of X-Men the Animated Series, has joined us to talk about his career, the X-Men obviously, and the animation industry. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
All right, so I think we should probably just start with the beginning. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, Larry? Like, where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Grew up with a single mom. You know, mom and dad kind of broke up early, so I pretty much was raised by my mom. Mm-hmm. And pretty much she moved a lot. And so I was disconnecting with friends at a very young age. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing consistent for me at that time was television and comic books. Right. And I got a chance. That's one thing that was consistent for me back in the 60s. I'm a little bit older than you guys. Right. And so that's how I started learning, you know, how to tell stories and get involved with comic books and drawing and stuff. The first show I remember as a kid, though, growing up, was a show called Astro Boy. Mm-hmm. Of course. And it really caught my imagination. This little kid robot flying around and doing things. And I used to go to school, and I think I'm talking about elementary school, and I would be drawing pictures of it, and my classmates were like, "Wow, what's that?" And you know, it's kind of nice to get a response. Hey, I draw this, and I got attention, so let me keep doing it. And it just kind of grew from that point forward. Fast forward to about in high school, art class was pretty fun for me to go into. Mm-hmm. But I had also met other artists who was in the class that had similar interests as I did, and we would all make up our own, like my version of the X-Men, my version of the Avengers, and we'd all make up our own little comic books in high school, and we would draw it for ourselves for our own enjoyment. Mm-hmm. And we'd show it to each other and read and critique and just have fun. And, you know, at the same time, you know, buying the Marvel books that were out at the time, mm-hmm. and using that to, fuel our imagination, so to speak. Right. And when I got out of high school, I actually wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I liked science. I liked art. Mm-hmm. And my first job actually was, I got a scholarship to go to a company called Control Data Institute, mm-hmm. where you would learn how to fix computers. So I took the class, and I got hired the first week when I graduated. And so for me, I worked for a lot of the companies like GTE, mm-hmm. Digital, Data General, and my last job was actually at McDonnell Douglas, working as a systems analyst. And I kind of did that for like 7 years, mm-hmm. right out of mm-hmm. high school. Right. But the thing is that as I'm working on the computers, I'm always still drawing comic books. I'm drawing pictures when the computers are running tests. I'm still buying books. I'm still playing around with ideas. Mm-hmm. And my friends, Will Meugniot and Mark Evanier, had moved on to working at Hanna Barbera. I think Will was working on Godzilla or something like that, or Jan of the Jungle, one of those shows. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we had all met in the 70s, not physically in person, but we did a lot of fanzine stuff. Right. Huh. where I would do covers, he'd do stuff, and we would just exchange, this pre-internet. We actually, now you guys call it snail mail, but that was our only means of communication back then, was just write and wait a week and maybe get a response from whomever. Mm-hmm. They told me back then you could, they were telling me, you should go to Hanna Barbera or go to Filmation or go to one of the studios and try and get hired, because back then you could get hired you might be work for 9 months. They let you go for 3 or 4 months and you get hired back again. So they had a seasonal hiring and firing back then. And I was just, for a long time, I was just very, just not sure of myself, I guess.
Right.
And I'm like 24 years old, and I have this epiphany saying, like, man, I don't want to be an old man of 30 years old and haven't even tried it. So I in my brain, my poor brain, I just told myself, look, I got to give it a shot. I'm not married, don't have kids. I got to try something. So I did something I usually tell kids not to do anymore.
Right.
But what I did was I quit one job and then went looking for another job, which is the wrong thing to do. Mm-hmm. But anyway, at the time I didn't know any better, and I quit my systems analyst job from McDonnell Douglas. I went out to go look for a job over at it was a company called Filmation. Mm-hmm. And I had heard that there were people that they were looking for storyboard artists. But I didn't know, I actually didn't know what a storyboard artist was. So I went there was a supervisor named Herb Hazeltine, and he was in charge of layouts. And so I went there to take a test in layouts. And I took the test twice and failed it twice. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, this is the stupidest idea I ever made. Why did I quit my job? But on the last time when I went in for the interview, the comic book pages I had drawn us in high school, where I was like telling my own stories, he saw some of that in my portfolio, and he said, you probably are better off trying to be a storyboard artist. In my head, I was going, what the hell is a storyboard artist? I had no idea. Because I was in my brain, I was always thinking, I got to work for Marvel. I got to work for DC. I got to work, I was thinking comic books all the time.
Right.
And so he took me upstairs to the head of storyboard, which was Don Christianson at the time. And I know Will was working at the time, but I went to Don. He was in charge of everybody. And I got introduced by Herb to Don. And Don, there was a show going on at the studio called Sport Billy.
Right.
And he gave me a page of the script. He said, well, take this, see what you can do with it. So he gave me the page, gave me some model sheets. And I read the little what it was. It didn't seem to be that hard. I went home and drew it, brought it back next day. He was surprised. He said, you're done? I'm going, well, yeah, here it is. And he took a look at it. And even though it was like needed some refinements, he liked the angles I did and and what I had drawn. And he actually took what I drew and put it into the show and hired me that day.
Wow.
Huh. And so from that day, it was in February of 1980. That's when I got hired at Filmation. I've been in animation ever since. But what I tell kids, don't quit a job
right.
until you have a job. And then you quit the first one. But you don't. I did an ass backwards, and I was like, I was young and stupid. What else can I say?
Right. So you entered the animation industry in 1980.
Yes.
But I see on your background listing in that you were already a story director on Thundarr the Barbarian in 81. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was. At the time, I was. There was a need. I think we'll mention it. Back in the 80s, there was so much work out there. They were looking for bodies everywhere.
Right.
And in 1981, in 1980, I got into business. 1981, I left Filmation and I got hired by Stan Lee to work at Marvel Productions.
Right.
And so I was working there with Stan and Art Patello. He's the actual director who hired me. But the people at Ruby Spears were looking for people to work on adventure shows. And so I was working at Marvel Productions during the day and then working at Thundarr at night. I was kind of doing double duty, It's kind of like I'm 25 years old. I don't have a life, just draw like crazy.
Right. Well, yeah, Will mentioned doing the same kind of thing back in those days. So I guess that must have been pretty common.
Yeah. There was like so much work, and people were looking, especially adventure shows, were like really, picking up the pace, and they wanted people that could draw superheroes or heroic adventures. And so I started picking up work from my day job and my night job. I worked on a lot of different shows.
Yeah, wow. When did you have time to sleep?
That's a good question. I just, back then I was like young and full of energy, and you just, I don't know, it just came to you. You could just draw all day. Draw daytime, draw nighttime, and just, go to sleep, wake up. It was just like, it was kind of like a dream job, because I was actually working at a place that they were paying me to draw something I would do anyway. And it was just like, wow, I'm drawing this, I'm drawing that. And the plus part about working on Thundarr was that Jacky Kirby and Gil Kane would come in, because they were doing model sheets for the different shows. And so you got a chance to not only work on Thundarr, but you got and I didn't see Alex Toth, but I see some of his model sheets and Jack, and they were like, I knew who they were, and these are like, comic book gods, and it's like, oh my God, Jack, how you doing? Oh, Gil Kane, it's like that was so much fun back then.
Yeah, that would have been. I mean, the year before, you just literally found yourself working with Stan Lee, who of course is a legend himself, and then the next year you're working with Gil Kane and Jack Kirby. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was like a fantasy come true, because it's like, I couldn't get to Marvel. I took back in New York to work for in comic books, but here I am working in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and I'm doing storyboards, and I'm meeting my idols in front of me, and I can talk to them, and they're talking back to me. It was a lot of
Marvel
fun.
came to you. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was great. So that's what happened. I worked at Marvel from like 1981 to about 1989.
Right.
And basically it was myself, Will Meugniot, Rick Hoberg, and Russ Heath, and we were all working on almost everything Marvel was doing from that point for about 9 years. So any kind of toy that Hasbro had in their store, we were basically TV shows of it.
I know, I was going to say, so they would literally just walk in, here some model sheets, or would they give you the toys and say, okay, make model sheets of this?
Yeah, they would give model sheets to the designers, which were Rick and Will and Russ Heath. And that's not my forte. If you remember, I tried doing that, and I failed that test twice at Filmation. So that wasn't that was not my calling. So they would take all the stuff and turn it into model sheets. On the adventure stuff, they had other people doing the comedy stuff.
Right.
But they were the main guys who did all the adventure shows.
Wow. Because going through this, like at that same time you were doing that for Marvel, you were working for a lot of other companies too.
Yep. One show that came about was there was a show called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that came around.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, and they came and needed a storyboard artist to work on. I think they did either one. I'm not sure if it's one or two miniseries, but I worked on both of those as a storyboard artist. And then when they got the green light to do 65 of them episodes, actually, I did about. I think they did. It was on the air for 4 years. They did a total of 169 episodes, and I worked on 118 of them.
Wow!
It was all working at home.
Yeah.
So I had a day job and a night job, just drawing and like crazy, and it was a lot of fun.
I'll bet.
Wow.
Yeah.
They had other freelance shows I was working on. Was let's see if I can remember. Sometimes I got to go to IMDB and look at what the hell I worked on.
Right, of course.
But there's things like Thundarr, Galtar, Mr. T. I'm not sure what else. Oh, I'm trying to remember it. It's a whole bunch of
Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I did Ghostbusters also.
Heathcliff, yeah.
Yep.
Cops.
Yep. And I did somewhere in there. Yeah, I did. TMS tried to establish a studio, and they did 2 shows. One was called Bionic 6,
Right.
And the other one was called The Mighty Orbots. I was doing those at night, working on those shows.
Holy
at the same time, we were doing G.I. Joe, Transformers, Bigfoot, Inhumanoids. God, what else is out there? That's all I can remember. I know Defenders of the Earth. That's right.
Defenders of the Earth. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine you probably don't have a lot of memories of this stuff because you were literally just too busy just cranking out storyboards to actually be aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a blur because it's kind of like the thing that happened in the 80s. You guys probably already know this, but network television was so restrictive that you couldn't do anything. When we were at Filmation, the show I was working on was the Lone Ranger Tarzan Hour, and what happened in that show was that you got Lone Ranger with a gun,
right,
and you got Tonto with a bow and arrow. They couldn't shoot anybody. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't even punch someone because of the restrictions on broadcast. No, you couldn't do anything. So it was things like if the bad guy was coming at the good guy had to step aside. The bad guy would go through frame, and then the frame would shake, and then you cut to the bad guy in some weird position where like he ran into a wall or something.
Right.
Or the Lone Ranger would take a gun and shoot a chandelier. The chandelier would fall. You wouldn't see an impact, and then you cut to the guy, and the chandelier's, he's caught inside the chandelier. And but that was the extent of adventure shows in the late 70s. And so what happened was when He-Man came out, they created the syndication market. They blew up, and they created this marketplace that because they were a huge success, and also because they're syndicated, they didn't have to follow the syndicate. They didn't have to follow the network rules.
Right.
So you could actually do a normal adventure show that unfortunately some people call were violent, but they were just regular adventure shows. So that's what set the pace for creating the Ninja Turtles, the G.I. Joes, the Transformers, all that stuff became into being because of He-Man was a trailblazer.
Right.
And so that was the idea of being able to draw a superhero punching a supervillain. It was like, it was like so much fun to draw because we had so much restrictions before. It was like, so it's like the 80s were a great time.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, because I'd heard somewhere that when they started the G.I. Joe Real American Hero, one of the things that got people on board was the idea that you could actually punch somebody on it.
Yeah, and it shouldn't have excited you when you were working as an artist back then, but when you actually saw a superhero character punch another character and he'd fall down, it was like, oh my God, we can do that? Oh, great, You see it all the time in the comic books, Kirby, the Thing punching someone, or Spider-Man punching someone, or the Hulk smashing something. And I was like, wow, we can do that now. It just opened up our imaginations and our enthusiasm to just cut loose,
Oh, yeah, definitely. Although, G.I. Joe, you still couldn't actually shoot anyone.
That's true. That was that we kind of played the logic of the board artists at the time. We played it like, okay, this is the A-team.
Right.
They shoot things, they blow things up, nobody really dies, and so we just played it off and said, also this was for young kids, so we really can't have. We couldn't even have flesh wounds. It was just like, no, they just shoot and don't hit it. Again, they couldn't shoot straight.
Right. Yeah.
And just shoot here, shoot. You blow up the bad guy's jet, and you have parachutes. The guys jump out, so they're not dead or anything. Unless you clearly establish like they're being flown by robots, you always have to have parachutes all the time.
Right. Now, that was something that came from the producers that they said, nope, that we've always got to show that they survive.
It was kind of a leftover from us working in network television, knowing that, okay, if these shows ever get shown on the networks in the future,
right,
we need to accommodate some of the restrictions that they put on us. So say, okay, you won't blow up a jet and then, yeah, he's dead. No, we'll show. So we added those little things to it because of that consideration.
Right. Now, was there a lot of I know because I've heard different stories about the time, but was there a lot of outside influence, like outside of the animation industry and the network, to tone that kind of thing down, or?
There were attempts. There was a lady named Peggy Charon who was in charge of the Action for Children's Television. She was always active. She was like one of the main instigators in the 70s to clamp down on what she said called "quote unquote" violent cartoons. Mm-hmm. But once we got into the syndication market, she could yell and scream, but basically it was syndication market, so she had very little effect on what we were doing. And also at the time, the only thing that restriction from what I remember was, if you had a G.I. Joe show, you really can't show G.I. Joe commercials. Mm-hmm. But you could show Transformer commercials in G.I. Joe. You could show G.I. Joe commercials in Transformers, but not in the body of the same show.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes sense. I remember that as a kid. They would show the Transformers commercials during G.I. Joe and vice versa because they always played together.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So that obviously it helped the toy company because they were able to promote their toy. I mean, we knew, everybody knew it was a toy, but when we were working on the show as a creative artist and writer, we were trying to create content, that would be entertaining for the audience, and just trying to make, at least in my case, what I tried to do is I tried to remember what it would be like, or what it was like to be a kid and watch these shows, and I tried to put into the shows things that made me get excited about it, and so I tried to always add that element to the shows I was working on, so that I didn't want to write down to the kids. I just wanted to get them excited about what I'm working on, so that they could be as enthusiastic as I was when I was younger. And so I think there were a lot of us who were doing that. So
yeah, I could see that, because that's what I remember that. As a kid, and even as a teenager, there was a lot of shows that you just had these like crazy ideas that everybody would run with.
Yes, there are a lot of shows that I kind of have a vague memory of that. There are things called like the Spiral Zone. There's Visionaries.
Yep.
There's Air Raiders. Yeah. There were a bunch of toy concepts that got turned into. We tried to turn it into, dramatic series, and stuff like that. Yeah, where every time we tried to, kick it up a notch. Just don't. Yeah. Right. Stupid stuff.
Yeah, because
let me just ask. There must have been some shows though, or some properties that you were, that when they handed you the design sheets, or when they handed you, it's like, we're going to work on this now. You must have thought, oh my God, no.
Yeah, I had. Yeah, there's some of those. Well, you did it for the money. You need some money this week, so you you took the job and said, okay, fine. Because I remember working on shows like Pac-Man and Rubik's Cube, Turbo Teen. Okay. Yeah, I just needed some money. Okay, fine, I'll draw it.
Got bills. Got to pay them. Yep, it's just the way it's going to be.
Yep. Yeah, there were some shows, not shows, but other freelance projects I got to work on, which were kind of fun. He-Man at the time they needed some in the toy packaging in the 80s. They had these little mini comic books that were behind the figure that came with the toys. The He-Man, and I drew those. I drew about 10 of those.
Oh, wow.
At home. That was my extra job. I did He-Man comic books. I did work at Roy Thomas on All-Star Squadron. That's right. Mm-hmm. Worked with Will and his Dean agents, and another guy named Dennis Malinay from Heroic Publishing. I did a couple of character he called Flair. I did a couple of backups for him on that show.
Oh, okay.
Not show. I'm sorry, comic book.
Comic book, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, did you ever actually manage to bring any of your own comic book creations to life?
Not to animation life, but I did one. I did a book for Charlton Comics called The Vanguard, and it was pretty much a one shot, and it was a book about these 3 freedom fighting girls who were the brother of one of the girls. Killed the father, blamed the girl, his sister, for the murder. Mm-hmm. She goes away. She discovers. She finds some other freedom fighters. They join up, and they go back to attack her brother to stop him from starting any new wars. And that was the premise behind it. And everybody's got superpowers, so it's like a lot of stuff. One girl, they were called Celestra, Cerebra, and Corona. Mm-hmm. And Celestra had the electrical powers, Cerebra had the mental powers, and Corona she flew in a ball of fire. Right. So that's why she called herself Corona. So that was one that I did that got published back in 80. Oh God, that's right, 81. Yeah, back in 81. I was pretty busy back then.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So yeah, I was a crazy time between the ages when I was like 25 to about 35. I was like drawing like crazy, doing different work.
Well, yeah, you can do that at that age.
Yeah. It was about I know I started slowing down a little bit when I got to be about 30, because that's when I got married.
Right.
So
of course.
That took a big chunk of time away from freelancing, right there.
Right. So, about what projects were you working on around the time you got married then?
Let's see. That would have been. Oh wait. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That would have been near the end of, somewhere in the middle of Marvel. Near the end when we were working on the Defenders. I think that's what it would have been. Yeah.
Right.
Defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, slowed down, and then also about 89, the company, Marvel Productions at the time, it folded. So it actually went away. So
right. Yeah.
That was a good time for that to happen too.
Right. Yeah. So that would explain why around that time you ended up doing like the real Ghostbusters, and you worked on Cops for a while.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was a lull period, so I got a chance to do that. And after Cops, I think Will was working there he got the job of working on the Ghostbusters, and then he got me some work on Ghostbusters, working with him. And then I worked and then from there I got a chance to be the producer-director of, they did the Karate Kid. So I was put in charge of that show. It was a one-season show.
Right.
And then after that, I hooked up with Will again, and we were doing Captain Planet together.
Right.
So he was a supervising director. I was the director on season 1 of Captain Planet.
That must have been an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was, because it was like we were working with Will, working with Ted Turner of all people. Yeah. He was pretty damn tall, and his wife Jane Fonda. It's like, oh man, Jane Fonda. How do you? I'm shaking her hand. I'm this 30-year-old kid. I'm 32 somewhere up in there, and I'm shaking her hand. It's like, wow,
right.
This is really cool.
Huh. So did Ted actually sit in on like planning meetings and things like that, or did he have very much to do with the show?
I only saw him like once or twice, and it was mainly on the first episode to see how it was coming together. And after that, I never saw him again, maybe Will did, but I never saw him again after that part. But he was very much involved with the first show to get it off the ground, and you know, he was pretty much in charge of everything because it was his concept. So we just tried to make it as good as we can, meeting what he wanted it to be. You know.
Well, yeah, a lot of pressure there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just a little bit. I mean, well, there's going back though. Was there a lot of pressure from like Stan Lee when you were working in the Marvel stuff?
I can't say no. Not the same kind of pressure because all of us are pretty much on the same page, working on Spider-Man, Amazing Friends, working on the Incredible Hulk. You know, those properties I knew like the back of my hand. So, you know, if Stan came up with a reference of like the abomination of the leader, it's like, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about, or you know, all the relationship, all that trivia. This is the stuff I told my friends. You know, at that time before Marvel Productions, all of that trivia I learned as a kid, it was absolutely useless in life until I got a job at Marvel. Then it was like a peg in a, you know, round peg in a round hole. Boom. And it all came together, you know.
Huh.
Yeah, I know. I believe it. I completely believe that. Huh. Okay. So speaking of Marvel, then, so you followed. Let's see. According to this, you followed Captain Planet up with X-Men: The Animated Series.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, after Marvel with Will and Eric and the executives from Fox Kids. So one of the cool things about it was that when Will and I, myself, and Rick Hoberg, when we were at Marvel Productions, we had tried to sell the X-Men early. When we did the Pride of the X-Men, and we had done other presentations, and we couldn't get it sold. And Margaret Lesh was our boss at the time. Now, you fast forward from the 80s to the 90s, she's the boss of Fox Kids. And so she wanted to shepherd the show. So she brought in Will, she brought in Eric, she brought in myself, and we wanted to do the X-Men show that we were trying to sell in the 80s. We wanted to do it in the 90s. Right. And so, so that's how I got hired to be the director on the show. And back then, most shows like my Karate Kid, it only lasted a season. Then it's like 13 episodes and you're gone. And so when we did the X-Men, we figured, okay, we're going to go for broke, make this the best show we can. Right. You know, and at the end of the 13th episode, you know, we had our resumes out for whatever the next show was because we'll just move on. And it was in the middle of post-production on the last episode that we found out, wow, it got picked up. I'm going to have work next year. and we did not know. So it, you know, kept going. But I made sure that first season, the first 13 episodes, I tried to put into the show all of the training I had learned from the 1980s on up into that one episode to try and make it as best I could. Because I wanted to make, okay, I'm going to, even if it's just one season, I'm going to do my best and put it out there and just, you know, see what happens. Right. And so for me, I had a crew of people working for me, artists and designers, that we were also comic book fans. And so we were guys would be bringing in their X-Men collections when we needed to get some characters or get some costume designs or ships, spaceships and everything. And we just made sure the show was accurate to the books, because my personal style is that I don't want to change anything unless I have to. So as much as possible as I could, I tried to we got the books and tried to be as accurate as we could with the costuming and the look and the stories. And so, like there was one episode, I think it was called No Mutant is an Island. The title might be wrong, but I know it's they went to Genosha, where all these mutant slaves.
Which is a mutant island, so that would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, but the writers did not know the comic books as well as we did, as I did, and there were dialogue quotes given to random mutants, but they were called Mutant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Because they really didn't know the mythology that well. And so once I found out the sex of, was this a female actor or a male actor that got that part, then I would go through with the guys and say, okay, let's make this one the Blob, make this one Sunfire, make this one Aurora, make this one North. I went through and populated the show with existing Marvel characters. It's like, why create new stuff when you have the entire Marvel characters you can choose from? So I put all of those in the show. And so I made sure to populate it as much as possible. So, I figured it'll be fun. If I was a kid watching it, I saw a character I didn't expect to be in the show, like Thunderbird or somebody, it would be real exciting. And so that's one of the things I did. I tried to populate the series of X-Men with accuracy, and also I put in what I guess people call today Easter eggs. I called them cameos back then, but I would drop in characters, other X-Men characters, into the show. Well, I did it without permission, but what the hell? I wanted the show to be fun, So, but I would only put them into the show if it didn't affect the story.
Right.
So it's like, you get a character like Meugniot, he starts monologuing about how I'm going to kick your butt, blah, blah, blah. Well, and there's one episode, I think he's talking to the UN, and he's just, monologuing. And instead of just showing, cut to the audience, I cut to different locations around the Earth, and you see, you see S.H.I.E.L.D. listening to him, like S.H.I.E.L.D. and War Machine. Then you cut you cut to Sinister listening, and then you cut to Meugniot. You cut to, I can't remember the other characters, but basically you cut around the world to other people listening to what's going on, just so it was interesting. And those characters didn't have any speaking parts, but if you were a fan of the books, you instantly knew who that character was.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're a regular audience, it didn't destroy the story, because it's just a guy monologuing about how he's going to do this and do that and stuff.
Right.
And so I would do things like that to try and keep the visuals interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. No, actually that makes, and it makes the world much bigger and more interesting for the audience and the characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So early on, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Sorry. Continue. So early on, you what?
Early on in the X-Men series, like we on Fox, I think it was Power Rangers, X-Men, Batman, Spider-Man. At some point, we were all on the same network. And in the X-Men, I tried to do a cameo, what I described, to put Spider-Man like in the background somewhere.
Right.
And it came back. No, you can use Spider-Man. No, I'm going. But it's the same network, They poo-pooed that, and it was like, okay, fine.
Right.
But what I discovered was that when I did the Genosha Island thing, and they had these generic mutants, and I made them into existing characters. One thing I discovered was that I submitted the characters. You have to submit everything for approval.
Right.
I submitted the characters through, but I didn't change the name.
Right.
If the voice actor was Mutant 1, this is Mutant 1, this is Mutant 2. I never gave the real names. Like, I never put Sunfire, I never put Blob, I never put Mystique. I just called them what they were in the script. Everything went through.
Right. Because they didn't know the story as well as you did. Yeah.
No. And that's when the light bulb above my head went bing. I went, okay, I know what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
And so from that point forward, I just never called anything what it was. And that's where all of those cameos came from. I even got Spider-Man in one episode, I think in the Phoenix Saga. The first one, where you see the top of a chimney, you see the shadow of Spider-Man, and then you see the arm of Spider-Man come in, and he goes, and shoots the webbing. That's all it is. And I call that I think I called it mutant hand, a mutant arm. And it went through. So that's how I got into the show.
Didn't Spider-Man cross over with, like, the Spider-Man animated series? Didn't it cross over with the X-Men animated series at one point?
Yep. Which was another reason it was driving me crazy, is that the Spider-Man series was able to do the X-Men in their series, but we couldn't do it in our series. And I think, in talking with Will, I think it had to do something the way the contracts were written.
Right.
That's the only thing I can think of, because there was no reason for us to have the restrictions of not using Spider-Man if Spider-Man can use all of the X-Men characters.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I can think of, because it just blew my mind.
Yeah. That is so odd.
Yeah. Well, was there a lot of, like, interference with that show like that, or?
It was the good part about the X-Men, the year one, was that there was no expectation, and that with a lot of the people who would be interfering with the show, and so when we got our show on the air with a shoestring budget. I think you guys might have heard how little money and how little confidence a lot of people had in the show.
Yeah.
And so because of that, there was no toys at the time too.
Right.
So we had no toy interference. We had no creative interference. And pretty much we were left to our own devices. And so Will and myself and Eric, we did the show we wanted to do. And I did things without permission, because I said, okay, this is going to make the show better. This is going to do. And I just made decisions on my own to make the show work as the way I wanted to see it. So basically, like, especially season one, that was me. I wanted to try and, this is the show I wanted it to look like.
Right.
So the company I was working for, like, the way it was set up also is that the company that got the credit for it was Saban. But Saban actually, they subcontracted the actual production out to a smaller studio called Graz Entertainment, and that's the company I was working for. And, as long as I didn't upset the apple cart, so to speak, the people at Graz, hey, cool, just do the 13 episodes, because they had also another show called Skeleton Warriors and something else going on. So they had several productions at the time. So as long as I didn't create any waves, I was good. Everything was good. And so it was the luck. I mean, today you can't do it today, because there's so many people so many cooks in the kitchen. There's no way anything we did back there could be replicated today.
Wow. Now, you mentioned just before we started recording that you even had to fly to Toronto to fix some of the voice work in that. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, what happened was the very first episode one that we were doing with Night of the Sentinels, the recording, after they had picked it was a long process of picking the actors to play the Jubilee, to play Cyclops and all the other characters. When they got the recording back of the first episode, the networks, Fox, they just went, oh crap, this is horrible, and everybody was kind of scared. It's like, we got to fix this. So I got shipped off to Toronto with Joe Calamari and the network guy, and to go in there and try and fix things. And basically, it was kind of not, in the end, the end run was that once we figured out what was going on, I was listening. We just pull the characters back. Don't make them sound like everybody's yelling, because then there's no place for the voice actors to do their acting if everybody's yelling and screaming a lot.
Right.
And so that was basically the easiest solution, but it took a while to get there. But
I remember the actor who played Storm was still yelling for most of the series anyway.
Yeah, they had her. Unfortunately, that happened too often, because they had her yelling, because they told the actress, well, there's going to be storm and lightning and thunder, so you're going to have to yell over the sound effects that you're creating. And so that's why they had her yelling a lot. And unfortunately, it came across as it almost came across as an incantation. I was really not happy about that part of it, but they were trying to be clear to the audience what she was doing, So she would basically tell them, wind, snow, rain, kind of like billboarding it for the younger audiences who are watching the show. So that's where that came from. There were times when I had to use their powers, I was able to just cut the dialogue. She doesn't need to talk here, So, and that was another providence that I had, because if if it didn't really work well, I just cut the dialogue out. I mean, and once you cut the dialogue out, you can't put it back in because you'd have to reanimate the shot. So I made sure to if I did that, I made sure that I had a reason to do it that I could justify later on. But, or another thing I would do would be, if the sequence that I'm drawing, not that I'm drawing, but the storyboard artist is drawing, if it's not working, I would redraw sequences or scenes and maybe have them take a piece of dialogue from another show and put it into there to cover that scene. It's like the Beast had this line that he used to say, "Oh dear." Right. And so I would repeat that in different situations, so that would be like his catchphrase.
Right.
Something, yeah. It was, to me, it was like a holdover of like watching Mrs. Fox say "fascinating." I tried to give him something to do, and and also in his case, in the season 1, he was kind of relegated to a subplot because we had too many characters to deal with. We had like 8 characters, and so we put him in jail. We kept him there and stuff like that. But that was one of the techniques I would use to repair some of the storyboards.
Right. Wasn't there some temptation early on, though, to get rid of some of the characters? I mean, it is hard to fit 8 characters into like a 20-minute episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, big time. And that's unfortunate. That's how come we lost Colossus. That's how come we lost Nightcrawler. That's how come we almost lost the Beast. But, one of the things that Margaret Lesh, thank God she gave us this caveat. She said, look, all the episodes of the X-Men have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But if you want to do a B storyline, an A storyline, a C storyline, that's fine. So the Beast was relegated to a B storyline where he was in prison and jail, and he was fighting for his rights. And we would keep him alive in different episodes until the resolution near the end. But that gave us a way to... I think that comes out to being 8 characters. I think we have 4 men and 4 women.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very wieldy. There's a lot of to try and get that in 22 minutes. It's really hard.
I bet. So it was Eric Lewald who was doing the writing on it.
Eric was the story editor, along with Julia Lewald, his wife. And I have to give big props to both of them and the writers that they chose, because if I didn't have anything good, if I didn't have a script to work from, there's no way I could make the shows look as good as they do, because these guys were giving me something to work with. That's the key, And so all I had to do from that point, having a good script, is just take it and, add to it and make it even better. And one thing I learned over the years from working at Filmation up into the X-Men is that I got a chance to work in different levels of production, and learning what the department who do the background colors, people who work on the character colors, people who work on doing slugging, people who do the translations, even the overseas companies. Everybody has a little bitch that they, like, you would listen to them. I would listen to them, and they would talk about, if only they would do this, if only they would do that. And for me as a director, I listened to them, and I would incorporate that into the storyboards I was doing, so that when the storyboards would hit each department, their concerns were addressed, and it would be in the boards, so that production would move real smoothly through the show. I mean, through the studio. Sorry. Yeah. And so it made it through with the minimum amount of speed bumps, as I call it.
Huh.
And
well, that's the benefit of experience.
Yeah. One thing that you'll notice if you go back and watch the X-Men, they never walk. That's the one thing I cut out of the X-Men unless they had to. They never walk. I have them, usually they're in a shot, they're doing the talking, and if they have to go somewhere, there's a wipe, cut, or they're there. Because the 22 minutes is very valuable, so I wanted to try and squeeze in as much story as I could without losing stuff. So that was one of the things I did, was just take out the walking. I mean, my friend Bruce Timm, I mean, he was excellent at doing these mood shots, and Batman's coming in with the long shadows, and that was what that scene was supposed to be. But we didn't have that in X-Men quite a bit, so we just I just got rid of the walking. And also talking to the overseas in Korea, if you're going to have, sometimes it's really hard because they didn't have a lot of money to work with. And if you're going to take 5 characters and walk them out of the scene, that's a lot of work for them. And and I thought it was better paced to have them work on the action scenes, when the people are flying and punching or shooting each other. Put the money over there and not over here. And so it helped overseas quite a bit to have production boards that just went through the system really easy.
Right.
Now, so that was
speaking of overseas and that, how much influence did you get on the way you boarded and everything from the Japanese stuff?
The answer to the question would be a lot, because back at Filmation, like when Will Meugniot and myself were there, that's when we were first getting introduced to anime, and for me it was like this. There was a director called Hayao Miyazaki, and he was doing shows like Cagliostro's Castle, Laputa, The Castle in the Sky, and we were like engorging ourselves and like watching this stuff, because here's this guy doing these gorgeous films, and it's still 2D. And Will and I and all the people at Filmation, we would come up. There's a place downtown in Los Angeles called Little Tokyo. We would go down there. We would buy these laser discs, which are like, like a big pizza box, right? Yeah, we would have like maybe a 2-hour lunch at Filmation, and we would like pop in the laser disc and just start watching it over and over again, because we were like fascinated with what was going on. None of us understood what was going on because it was all Japanese stuff.
Right, yeah.
But we would just take the films and watch it, and just it was just fascinating to get to see what they were able to accomplish. And fast forward when you were talking to me about the X-Men, I put as much of that knowledge into that show as I could. I did that also with G.I. Joe, putting the Japanese approach to the G.I. Joe series that I worked on.
Yeah. Right. Which, of course, if I recall right, G.I. Joe was being animated in Japan, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it was. But a lot of the directors here were from a generation before me, and so they weren't really into the Japanese style of moving the camera around. So we had some fights there. Not fights, I shouldn't say fights, but we had some
disagreements.
Yeah, that's a nice. Yeah, we had some disagreements, but but when it went overseas, like there's a scene like where in G.I. Joe where the plane lands, the front wheel fills the screen, and then turns, and then the jet goes into the background.
Right.
Well, the American directors cut. They just cut when the wheel came into full frame, and then they cut to another shot where the jet comes in.
Right.
But they didn't take the image off the storyboard. They just threw an X through it.
Right.
But the overseas saw it, what I was trying to do, and they actually put that into the show. And so it's like, yay! Small victories. But it was that kind of stuff that, we kept putting into the show, and the Japanese saw it, and it made everything better. And it was, It was small victories, but it was also our way of trying to incorporate some of that anime into our stuff.
Right. I think it definitely showed. It definitely made it more lively because of the way you presented it, and you were combining the best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because there was some of that too. Like I remember watching like Thundarr the Barbarian. One of the things that made it interesting was it wasn't as staged as all the cartoons like prior and of its time. That there would be through shots, and there would be shots that would track like background to foreground.
Yes. We I'm trying to remember the names. The guys working on Ruby Spears, they were also. We were all like young kids learning, just getting into anime. We were incorporating a lot of that stuff into our style, I guess you could say it. So we were part of that little revolution.
Right. It would have been Rudy Larvera and John Kimball are listed as the directors for Thundarr.
Right. But the guys in charge of the studio was Ken Ruby and Joe Spears.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, Dorman, that's right. His name was Dorman. John Dorman was one of the main guys directing over there.
Okay.
On Thundarr, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that, again, like that's I think the greatest Saturday morning cartoon ever was Thundarr the Barbarian, and that was one of the things that made it interesting was all the weird shots and all the weird like angles and that.
Oh yeah, God, it was so much fun to work on. I mean, because like a lot of the mixture was a design. It was a design mixture of Toth and Kirby and Kane, and you'd have one. I think you'd have one or two model guys that would try and conform everything into one style for overseas. But it was a lot of fun, And the stories are like, it was a apocalyptic world, and you could just draw freeform.
Yeah,
it was just a lot of fun to draw.
Yeah, because there was like that, and again, what made it the greatest show ever was you had like wizards and robots and aliens and mutants and. Yeah.
It was I wasn't involved with the writing, but yeah, I enjoyed working on it because of all the weird stuff they were putting into it. And it was like, it's like a nice comic book with a lot of cool designs and. Kirby came up with this character that his head rotated or something. Yeah, a good face and a bad face.
Gemini, yeah.
Yeah. And there were a lot, there was a lot of cool stuff in that show. Yeah, so yeah, it was. I loved doing freelance on that show. So yeah.
It was one of your first projects as well.
Yeah.
So,
so whenever Thundarr, because they have their own staff on board, but they can only handle so many.
Yeah.
Right.
But, when you would get a script, they gave you, I think back then it maybe gave us 5 weeks to finish one script, and but they'd hand out a script, and then next week there's another script.
Wow.
So who we're going to hand this off to? So they have to find 3 more guys to do it. And then after that, there's another week. So you got to hand out some more. And so until the original staff guys finished, they had to keep handing out freelance to everybody else. And so that's how you would get some work. And the faster you drew, more episodes you worked on.
Right.
Wow.
So I can infer then that just listening to you, that a big part of getting work for a storyboard artist in Hollywood is, to be blunt, or Los Angeles, I should say, to be blunt, is knowing people. Like it sounds like a lot of things just come through connections. Yeah,
a lot of it is connections. A lot of it is relationships. It's a lot of being a reliable. At that time, for adventure shows, one thing you had to be obviously draw good adventure shows. I mean, adventure comic books or adventure whatever. But the other thing is that you had to be reliable.
Right.
Because it's like clockwork. They have to do, this had to be done at a certain time. Then they got to turn it into a timer to the director, get it approved by the networks, get the changes in, get it slugged. There were like all of these cogs in a machine, that you just had to be good and you had to be on time.
Right.
And the other thing I always talk about that I think Will talked about too was that you need to be a person. Don't be a dick. Just be a nice guy. Turn it in. Just
right.
Just be easy to work with. That's all you had to be. With those three things,
right.
You got work. I mean, that's how it worked back in the 80s, and it was like we just had a lot of work. We had a lot of nice guys we were working with, and the cool part was that, unlike today, a lot of the work was still done in the States. So that's how come we had so much work to work with, because the overseas production had not really kicked in yet.
Right.
So they were doing as much work here as possible.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And that's, I assume, is also how you got so much work from different companies, is you just knew people everywhere at different companies and you had connections, right?
It was the connections, and also people would recommend you.
Okay, yeah.
So I worked with Larry on this. I worked with Will on this. I worked with Rick Hoberg on this. And so, they'd ask you, like, who do you know that's available? Then you give them a name, and they call, and give you calls all the time. And we were, like, working like crazy. I mean,
oh, yeah.
I can't do that anymore. I retired last year, but back in the day, I was just, I don't know how I got any sleep done. Right.
Well, yeah, I think you probably earned your retirement from the sounds of it. You probably earned it 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a time that I talked about with my kids. I told them, like, I was just extremely lucky, and right place at the right time with the right friends. I mean, the X-Men for me was like the best show I worked on, because it gave me the most creative freedom to do a show that is exactly the way I wanted to make it. I wanted it to look like, and how I wanted it to sound. And I would, I was allowed to do editing and enhancements, and nobody shot me down. I only got shot down once, which was Spider-Man. After that, it never happened again.
Right. Well, you figured out the way around it.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. So there were like, I think when we were doing the Phoenix Saga, I made sure that the guys, when they worked on it too, like, I think there's a sequence where the X-Men are fighting the Imperial Guard, I think, on the moon or something. And so I made sure to pull stuff. I think it was John Byrne who drew that. I made sure to pull certain scenes from the comic books and put it into the TV show, so that you'd actually see maybe certain angles from the comic book actually as an animated scene, So if you knew the book, you're going, oh, wow, that's from the book. That's from John Byrne,
That is so cool. Huh.
We took his ship designs for the Shi'ar ships and stuff like that. Huh. And, so it was a lot of fun. And there were...
Now, is there anyone you worked with you thought really brought out the best in your work? Like, is there anyone that you thought who you just sync with as working with as a team, like writer, director, whoever?
Well, the guy that I attribute a lot of my growth as an artist, as a director, and as an artist was the fellow who initially hired me to work at Marvel Productions. His name is Art Vitello, and he hired me away from Filmation, which had this incredible stock system where you basically you couldn't draw anything. It was like a puzzle you had to put together. Like the Tarzan left, Tarzan right was like 1A, 1B, stuff like that. And it was more of it was kind of restrictive in terms of being a creative person. And when Art invited me to well, not invited me, when he hired me to work on Spider-Man, it was a syndicated Spider-Man. They needed another 26 episodes drawn to fill out a syndicated series. And so when I got the chance to work on it, he said, "You don't have to use stock." I went, "What? No stock? I don't have to reuse stuff over and over again?" And that working with art helped me to go back to being an artist again. And I got a chance to do a lot of stuff that was always in my head, but I didn't get a chance. So Art Vitello was like one of the key artists who allowed me to grow again. So he brought out the best in me, I think, when I first started. I used a lot of the three guys for me that were, I guess it's four. The four people that I liked a lot was Miyazaki, Jack Kirby, John Buscema, and there's an artist. I mean, it's called Andrew Loomis. He's a how to draw human figure. Those were my influences growing up in my 20s. That I attribute to helping me become a better artist. Miyazaki's one of the main ones that helped me become a better director, because when I would watch his work, none of us could understand Japanese, but his stuff was so well storyboarded that the only thing you didn't understand was the subtext, but you knew you knew the big story arc that was going on, and I used that a lot to try and become a better storyteller.
Yeah, well, learn from the best, definitely.
Yeah, that's where you shoot for. Shoot for the top.
Right, definitely. Now, did you ever have a chance to actually meet Miyazaki?
No, God, I wish I had. I had a friend of mine named Boyd Kirkland. I was so jealous. He got a chance to. He was one of the directors on the Batman animated series, and I'm not sure exactly what he was on vacation. He got a chance to go to Japan and meet him. Oh, I was so jealous.
I bet.
Oh man, that's the one guy I wish I had met. I mean, I was really impressed by when I first met Stan, because here's Stan, the guy I read all of his books since I was in elementary school in the '60s.
Right.
And here I am working with Stan, and a lot of people. The one thing I tell people ask me about Stan, and I said, look, there's three Stan Lees, and there's Peter Parker, there's Spider-Man, and there's J. Jonah Jameson. And when he would come to work, if he came in a good mood, it's Peter Parker. You can talk to him like I'm talking now, no big deal, everything's cool. Then there's Spider-Man, where you got to remember, this is like 40 years ago. He was like active. He was jumping on tables, showing this is how Spider-Man does this, and this is how his fingers have to attach to the wall, so he's crawling. I mean, he was like all over the place, full of energy. I was like, wow. Then there's J. Jonah Jameson. And if you came to work as J. Jonah Jameson, you knew he was in a bad mood, so you just walked away.
Right.
You just wait for J. Jonah Jameson to go away. But but one of the things I told my friends at the time about was that's why he can write Spider-Man so well, because he's all three of those characters. He can write Spider-Man dialogue. He can write Peter Parker dialogue. And then he can write J. Jonah Jameson dialogue, because it's all in his head. He has those personalities in there.
Yeah, wow, I'd never heard it put that way. That's really interesting.
That's pretty good.
I was there for like 10 years, so I got a chance to see quite a bit of them.
I bet you did. Do you still keep in touch with Stan at all?
Not recently, no. I think the last time I talked to him once last year. But yeah, we stay in touch, but not that much.
Right. No, I can understand. So, Larry, I want to ask you, are there any shows you worked on that you think that they should either reboot or that people should go back and look at? Like, is there anything that you kind of look back proudly on, and that you think people should pay more attention to?
Well, for me, one show I worked on was called RoboCop Alpha Commando, because that was kind of fun. I worked on, and I always thought, I'd like to have another shot at that character and maybe have some more fun. It only lasted for one season. I was I directed on that. Mm-hmm. The other show would be The Karate Kid, which was another one season thing. Mm-hmm. And I've always wanted that character to be, at that time, to be more like Lupin, which was the guy in Cagliostro's Castle. More high adventure, of the character doing stuff and jumping around, and that was my approach. But that wasn't the network's approach to the scripts. Mm-hmm. And so when I was working on it, I tried to minimize all the dialogue and maximize the action to try and keep to make the show interesting. But I couldn't. I didn't have the authority like I had before in the X-Men, so I couldn't do everything I did before. Later on Karate Kid. Karate Kid came before X-Men, so I didn't have the kind of freedom yet to do what I wanted. Oh. And the third one, was another one? Oh, believe it or not, I worked on the kind of like it was called Galtar, which is kind of like a Thundarr ripoff, but it was done at Hanna Barbera, and it was actually kind of fun. It was kind of like working on Thundarr, but not quite. But it was kind of fun to draw, the guy with the sword and riding the horses and magic and science. That was fun. I always thought those three would be fun to revisit again.
Right. Oh, I can see that.
Interesting choice.
Interesting choice.
Yeah.
Now, how about a project that you wish you'd worked on that you didn't get a chance to work on? Was there anything you wish you'd done more of or had the chance to work on?
Well, because I was working at Marvel, I didn't get a chance to work on Legion of Superheroes. And that as a kid was like one of the other series, like the X-Men, that would have been fun to work on. And that was probably the one. So I worked with Bruce Timm on Batman in season 1, so I got a chance to do some Batmans. I got a chance to do some Supermans. But Legion, I missed that boat, and that was the one series I thought, I liked that series. That was like in the 60s. That was like that was fun. I think it was Kurt Swan, and they had some Jim Shooter scripts where it was just it was a good fun series at that time in the 60s. And
right, yeah.
I would have enjoyed working on that series if I could have. So I guess that's one that got away.
One of the ones that got away. Okay.
Yeah. I got a chance to work on, like I grew up in the 60s on a show called Johnny Quest. And as a kid, they had some really cool episodes. They had really scary episodes. And fast forward into the late 90s, I think, they were doing the second season of Johnny Quest. And so I got hired to do the second season with my friend Davis Doy. And we did 26 episodes. He did 13, I did 13 for a syndication package. And so we got a chance to, the season before us, the guys took Johnny Quest into their own direction. They made him a lot older or whatever. And when they gave it to us, we said, no, we're going to go back to Doug Wildey. And so we went back to the Doug Wildey approach and just made him a little bit older, but we tried to keep it just like the Doug Wildey days as much as possible. Right. And that was my other chance to work with writers. Myself, Davis Doy. We'd have two writers, Lance Falk and Glenn Leopold. And we'd go out to lunch, and they would pitch shows to us, and we'd all talk about, let's do Dr. Zen, or let's do the Daughters of Zen. And we were talking about different things, and we would come up with like 13 episodes over lunch, not in one day, but that's how we did it. And so we were all contributing to making the show as best we can, and that was like that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work too, because we had we had an incredible short deadline, so we had to do a lot of work in a short period of time. But it was even though we had that challenge, knowing that we were going to do a show that was reminiscent of what we grew up with as a kid, a lot of us didn't mind. We knew we were going to get a good product out, and it's kind of like the first season of X-Men. It's like, let's just go for it,
Right.
Let's just do it. And luckily, everybody was on the same page.
I noticed you keep mentioning the first season of X-Men. Is there a reason? Because there were other seasons, right? The show was on for about 5 seasons, I think it was.
Yep. Yeah, I did the first 4 seasons. But when I say the reason I say that is that I mentioned is that we never expected anything past season 1.
Right.
And then we got season 2, season 3, season 4. It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
We're doing something right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so season 1 was the season you put all your heart into, basically.
Yeah. And there were things in it like the episode 13 when they're fighting all the Sentinels. It's like we did like dozens of Sentinels, and then they're fighting Master Mole. In that, like, I resequenced dialogue. I redid stuff in the last episode. What was not there when I first read the script was that when Xavier's flying the Blackbird to try and blow up Master Mole, he says his dialogue, he hits the button, and then he ejects, and then it flies into the robot. Right. And that was it. But it didn't feel right. So what I did was, he's flying toward Master Mole. And as he's talking, you see Magneto hover near him. And then I show Master Mole shooting out a beam out of the palm of his hand. Because I think the robot would do something. He's not going to stand there and just get blown up. Yeah. So Magneto's on top of the ship. He creates a force field that protects the ship from the blast. And then Xavier jumps out of the ship. The robot gets blown up. And then Xavier is in his parachute. And then Magneto comes up and has a piece of dialogue. Now we're even. Next time we meet, whatever it was. But that piece of dialogue was at the beginning of Act 3, not the end. So I moved the dialogue into a better place to make the scene work. So there were things, and that was like, that's some of the vivid things I remember in season 1 that I did to try and fix stuff the way I think it should have been. So there's a lot of things like that I did over the first season to try and okay, I know this works better, so I just changed without.
Right. But, so, yeah, as I said, you were putting all your heart into it. You were trying new things. It's just like you figured you only had one shot, so might as well just go for broke.
That's it. After one season, okay, if I'm fired, that's fine. I'm out.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But then you got 3 more seasons, and you're off and running.
Yeah, it was, and the cool part was that I was able to continue that type of not changing the script, just plussing the script. There was an episode with Cable and Bishop time traveling, and Act 1 was written by one writer, Act 2 was written by another writer, and so, but they referenced the same time sequence, and so I had to redraw a good 45 pages of Part 2 to match Part 1, but with a change, because now suddenly Cable's in it. Instead of Cable wasn't in it before, it was just Bishop. And so I had to redraw stuff. So there's a sequence where it goes on for almost like a minute. There's no dialogue. It's all fight stuff. And that stuff I redrew. I made it all up. But, so there was things like that I did to make the show better. There's another episode with Xavier goes kind of nuts. He's talking to Lilandra, and then there's like an evil version that comes out of Xavier, and the writer he wrote a sequence where Wolverine cuts the third rail trying to save an illusion of Jubilee, and I didn't like the idea of showing Wolverine cutting the third rail, so I created an entire sequence of Wolverine inside of the subway car, and then running into different illusions. That's when he runs into Sabretooth. That's where he runs into Deadpool. And then he tries to save the illusion of Jubilee and he almost gets killed by the trolley car. Now, again, that goes on for about another minute. I made all that up. That wasn't in the script.
Right.
Just trying to kick it up a bit.
Wow.
So
did the writers get annoyed by this sometimes, that you're going in and you're literally taking sections of their stuff out and putting your own version in?
No, pretty much. I was at that point. I was pretty much in charge of all the visuals, and so I was making the show into the vision I thought was the best. And so I didn't change any of the words, but I tried to make the scenes better. So I always thought of it as like I'm plussing stuff. I'm not changing anything. I'm trying to make it better.
Right.
And that was always my approach.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a team effort to try and make everything. We're working on the same team. Let's go and let's put out the best stuff. And I just had to go with my gut instincts in a lot of cases for making stuff better, knowing the Marvel mythology and bringing all my directing skills to bear on the show. There's something, I'm not sure which Phoenix this is, but there was a sequence where there's a character called Gladiator, the guy with that mohawk.
Yeah, he's basically Superman with a blue Superman with a mohawk, yeah.
Right. Well, the original script had the characters on top of a castle. They hear thunder, and Gladiator lands, and it's like, wait, we need to build this character up. So I created a sequence where all you see is the guy's fists, and you see something's approaching the Earth. You see a comet coming in. You see fists coming in. You see.
I remember that sequence. Yeah.
I made all that up, because I wanted to I wanted to set this guy up, and it's like, oh man, what the hell is this? And then when you have, and then I personally drew the scene, the Superman versus Hulk scene, where you see Juggernaut punch Gladiator, and Gladiator doesn't move. Mm-hmm. I drew that shot and then have him pick him up and throw him over the horizon.
Right.
So those are the kind of things I did to try and not change the scene, but to try to plus it. Mm-hmm. Give the character an entrance, show how powerful this character is, because also by throwing him off the horizon, when Phoenix does the same thing to Gladiator, now you can see the scale of power, like who's more powerful than who,
Right.
That kind of stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's that kind of stuff I did over the 4 years. I didn't work on the 5th year. That was done by my assistant director. Oh crap! I'm losing the name right now. Frank Squalacci was the director in the 5th season, so he took over after I left. I left to go work at New World Pictures to do the 2nd season of the Fantastic Four.
Right.
And so that's where I left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've actually done some live action storyboarding as well for some actual non-animated projects.
Yeah, I got some Captain Power stuff and stuff like that out there. Oh. That was kind of fun. It's a totally different animal because live action boards don't require as much choreography as animated shows. So you can just do setups. And the director is actually going to direct the real actors. He takes it from there. But you just drawing setups for them.
Huh.
Now, are they doing the storyboards mostly because of effects sequences? Is that why they're doing them for live action?
In a lot of cases, yeah, because they want to try and they want to see what it looks like, how they're going to, and try and price it. Because a lot of times when you set up for an effects shot, they'll take that and take it out to different effects shots. Say, how much to do this? How much to do this? How much work is this? And they'll give them a bid so that if they need to make adjustments for like a blue screen, green screen, they'll tell you, okay, I can do the fire in his hand, but you need to put this behind him so I can do a clear matte and, that kind of stuff. They'll give you all the technical jargon you need to do the shot with, but at least if you have something to work from, that's how they can price out the show.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a good technique. So you said that you've actually retired as of last year, so there's no more projects on the horizon. You're not even going to do freelance anymore.
No, and I've been called, and it's like, nope, I'm out of it. I am going to relax. I retired June of last year. It's been a year now, And so, actually, I'm kind of like working on some other projects, my own little projects like the Vanguards and stuff like that.
Right.
And some other projects to try and do like Will's doing, like do some e-books, do some children's books, do some projects like that I've always wanted to do, but they got put on the shelf because I was working in animation, and now that I'm out of it, I can go back to having some fun, you know.
Well, yeah, you've got that freedom, you've got that opportunity. Now you can put those skills to work in a new area.
Yeah. So believe me, back when I was, in the what am I saying, the 70s, when I was working I used to do fanzines for myself and working for companies like the Comic Reader, the Wowie Kazowie, Buyer's Guide, and I would just do, it was just fun stuff. You draw pictures for them and everything, and but there was no internet. There was no published. There was no on print on demand options like you have today. And so today, God, there's so many ways you can get stuff published. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's true. You can just do it all yourself and just get it out there, and the world can find it.
Yeah, and so that's what I think Will and I both are going to try and do. Is like, do our we can do exactly what we want to do and get it out there and just see what sticks, see what the audience likes, doesn't like, and just now we can just have fun and kick back,
Actually, there's kind of two things that I'm wondering, because I noticed you worked on Spawn.
Yes.
And I was wondering, because there was you're familiar with the Japanese stuff, and I've always wondered, we always seem with our animation here, we kind of come up to that line where you could almost start producing like the action stuff, the adventure stuff for, say, an older audience or an adult audience, but we never quite seem to get to the point where we can sustain that kind of thing.
Right.
And I was wondering if you had any like thoughts as to why, or whether or not we ever could.
That's a good question. I would, with Spawn, they, it was totally different because they wanted us to approach the storytelling, not in the same conventional patterns that we used to. So we had to think outside the box and how to tell the story. I think how to do that today, I think it's still possible, but I think it's going to take a certain type of creative talent out there it's possible. I think it's quite possible, but it's finding the money, the budget, and someone that believes in it that can pull it off. It's the key to any of these shows to get them on the air, to get them seen by the public, is distribution. I mean, the one thing that's going good right now is that you have Netflix, you have Amazon Prime, you got YouTube, you got everybody's competing for these creative people out there. And I noticed one of the things that they're doing is that they're searching for the next Spawn. They're looking for the next creative team or showrunner that can pull it off. They haven't found one yet, but I think they're still looking. So I think it is possible. But right. So yeah, I think it's possible. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention was almost forgot. There's I don't know if you guys knew about the G.I. Joe movie that came out in the late 80s. The opening intro where it's all around the Statue of Liberty. Back then, when we were going to do the movie, they asked, I think there were three of us at the time, it was myself, Frank Parr, Boyd Kirkland, to come up with opening titles. And so we had a couple of weeks to draw it, so I went home and I drew up the opening titles for that movie, where the Cobra's attacking the Statue of Liberty, and then G.I. Joe appears and kicks their butt and stuff like that. But I made that all up from scratch. I just made it up at the time. It was a lot of fun, but the cool part about it was that when it got animated, I was so impressed because they actually did everything I drew, and they actually. Yeah, it was one of those things, like if you draw something on a page, like you might have a character do something, and then you have secondary and tertiary different actions going on at the same time. they usually will ignore everything else and just do the one.
Mm-hmm.
This one, they drew everything, all the balloons, all the extra characters and stuff, and because it had a theatrical budget, they put they did everything, and it was so nice to see that, and I was so impressed. It's like, wow, they did it, and so the cool part was that I loved the opening titles. So the opening titles and the first 15 minutes of the movie, where you have a character named Pythona going into like a terror. I think it's called terrordrome.
Yeah, they're called terrordromes. Yeah.
Yeah, where I did all that. I did all of that myself. So the first 15 minutes and the opening title was me. It was like, oh, this is cool. This is like,
Right.
yeah, because they gave it a theatrical budget, not a TV budget. So it was really nice to see your efforts actually on screen, and they actually did what I asked them to do. It was like, wow.
And I have to say, Larry, that is probably one of the best animated openings I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I've always thought that. I'm not just saying that. I really have believed that since I saw it, like in 1986 or so.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I was totally blown away, and it's like, wow. Yeah.
And they sync the music up perfectly with it and everything, and it's just a beautiful piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks. Okay. When I drew it, I didn't have any music. They just said, okay, the music's going to be 3 minutes, 4 minutes long, so just draw to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess they saw the images and they just went for it, and I was like, wow, this worked out great. But that was a lot of fun. I thought I'd mention that too. Oh, and I got a chance to write one G.I. Joe episode. I did write one. It was called Hearts and Cannon. I wrote one G.I. Joe episode, and I wrote one Spider-Man and Amazing Friends episode called Swarm.
Mm-hmm.
But I never got credit for it, but I got paid for it. It was where Spider-Man fights a guy made out of bees.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that episode. At the time, I'm a young kid, 25 years old. What the hell? What the hell are you doing? So they kind of like let me write I wrote the plot. I wrote the outline, and then it was written by Dennis Marks. But when I saw the finished product, I was like, wait a minute, that's everything that I put there. I could have wrote this thing myself, but but they paid me for the other stuff. So.
Right, yeah, still got paid. Okay, so I think obviously you're pretty happy with your career then. That you're pretty happy with the way things worked out.
Yeah, I'm very happy. Like I said, I was very lucky. There's a guy named Floyd Norman. He was like the first black animator over at Disney. I think he worked on The Jungle Book or something like that. I didn't find out until about 10 years ago that he told me for a long time, storyboard, people working in the story department, it was a glass ceiling. And that when I got hired at Filmation in February of 1980, I was the first black storyboard artist for Saturday morning. Yep.
Huh.
Yeah, so I kind of broke a glass ceiling that I didn't even know was there.
Wow.
Are there, sorry to ask, but are there many black people working in your profession?
Yeah, now. But in terms of Saturday morning, I was the first one in the business.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, wow. But the thing is, I didn't know about that until about 10 years ago when when he told me about it. I went back into the research and talked to my friends who were there at the time, and there were black artists who were working as an animator. There were black artists who were working in layout and character design, but not story.
Huh.
And so I got a chance. I was the first storyboard artist, black storyboard artist for Saturday morning.
Wow.
So it's like and I got hired based upon kind of like a meritocracy. The guy liked my work,
right?
And I got hired. And I was like, I was just happy to get paid,
Right.
So that's something else I could probably add there. That was.
Right, yeah, that's great. Actually, Don, I just remembered something. Didn't you want to ask him about Mighty Orbots?
Yeah, that was the other.
That's one of your favorite shows of all time, so.
Yeah, Orbots was a lot of fun to work on, and that was one of the shows when I kind of changed the script, and now I didn't have the authority, but it was like there's an opening in Orbots in one of the shows I worked on where the writer wrote these characters opening of the show, and they're playing chess. I'm going, my God, that's so damn boring. You got characters walking around a chess table. So without asking permission, I started the show off with you're flying down this tube. The camera comes out, and you see this robot come out, and he does a couple of flips, and then you see another robot, and they start fighting each other, and they exchange a couple of blows, and then you pull back, and you see that these are characters on a computer chessboard that are being controlled by other people. Because I just didn't want to. I just not want to draw something as boring as a chess thing. A chess game. It's an action show. Yeah. And so I stuck that in, and fast forward maybe about 8 or 9 months. When I came back to pick up some work, the director came by. He says, "Are you Larry Houston?" I'm going, "Uh-oh." I'm going, "What?" I think they, what did I do? And he asked me, "Did you do that sequence with the robots flying out of the chess game?" I'm going, "Yeah." He says, "Thank you." He shook my hand. I was I was speechless, because I had taken something and just made it more interesting. But that's what I try and do. I mean, I did that before. There was a Ninja Turtle show out of New York, and I tried to do the same thing. They fired me after I turned the board. I changed things, but it's like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
But I'm just trying to. When I work on a show, I try and do the best I can, and trying to do what I think will make the show better. Right. And in most cases, it worked. Sometimes it don't. So you live and learn.
Because I've always wondered, do you know why the Mighty Orbots cartoon just disappeared?
Will would be a better authority on that, because he actually got into the nuts and bolts of the financing behind that show. Yeah, it didn't click, and they had some financing things happening in Japan, but it was, Will would know better than I, unfortunately. I'm the guy working in the trenches, and Will actually be out there with the generals, and so I worked on Orbots, I worked on Bionic 6. Those were, and I did a lot of storyboards on those 2 shows. But unfortunately, I don't know exactly why, but he would know.
Because those who like Bionic 6 too, that was another show that that one lasted for a bit, and it didn't look cheap. Like that looked like it was a fairly pricey production. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It did have budget behind it. They had toys behind. So I think one of the main things about Bionic 6, because I bought some of the toys back at the time, that they were pushing toys of all the characters and vehicles and stuff. So I think they had expectations of making a ton of money, and it didn't click. Yeah. I don't remember toys of the Orbots being sold in the States. So that might have been part of the reason why they had no way to recoup their financial investment. Because what happens is that you're either going to recoup your investment from reruns, or you're going to recoup your investment from the ancillaries, the toys, the apparel, and stuff like that. So if you haven't got toys or apparels, you're pretty much stuck with just reruns. And if the show only lasts for 13 episodes, you can't really make money that way. Yeah, you got to have at least 26 or 65 to syndicate, and they only did, I think, 1 season or 2.
Right.
Just 1 season. Yeah.
Because the other odd thing with Orbots is it had an ending. Like usually cartoons didn't do that back then.
That's you're right. I unfortunately I don't remember the ending. You'll have to tell me, because I don't remember the last episode, because that's actually Orbots was something I was doing extra. That was my night job.
The second night job.
Yes, that was the second night job. So I don't know what the ending was, but I'm getting old, so I don't remember. I'm sorry.
No, because it was just the ideas. As I recall, what had happened was they found plans that they thought were for their replacements, but it was the older designs, and they figured, well, we can show them we're still useful, and they just go to the bad guy's planet and thump on him till he's like destroyed. And I thought, nobody else does that. Why does nobody else do that?
No, that's smart. That sounds like it's all in if you can work with people that have forethought, like they know where they're going to go with the series. They know, okay, in episode 13 we're going to do this, or 26. That's one of the things with the X-Men, with the Johnny Quest, is that we knew what the arc was for the 13 episodes. We're going to do this.
Right.
Okay, second season is going to be Sinister and Morph, and he's going to do this.
Right.
So we would plot out a 13-episode arc with subplots. And so with Orbots, what you're describing sounds like they knew where they were going to go, and not leave any dangling participles at the end.
Yeah. Because after listening to you talk, I'm kind of sorry you didn't get to do the Legion of Superheroes, because the X-Men show always looked like the people who did it were fans. And the Legion, when they did that one, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't quite the Legion.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed they went more science fiction-y than the actual comic books used to. And it would have been interesting to see with like I said, the history and obsessiveness you did the X-Men, what the Legion of Superheroes would have been like with that.
Yeah, if I had my druthers, I probably would have done the Legion of Superheroes, what I remember back in the Jim Shooter days, the 60s, try and go with that version of them and have some fun with it,
Yeah, that definitely would have been more fun.
Yeah.
That, because it's kind of, they're kind of like, I can't say they're the X-Men, they're kind of like the X-Men. They got a collection of kids, everyone's got a single superpower, and, and it's in the 30th century, so you have a lot of science fiction stuff you can play with, but it was like, you could have fun with that if you approach it with, I don't know if the right word is reverence, but respect. Maybe it's just respect.
Yeah.
Respect for the source material. And just trying. There's a reason why stuff is successful. And if you're going to work on a show, like if I was going to work on Doc Savage or some show like that, or Zorro stuff, I would go and do the research and find out, okay, why was this thing so successful? What made it work? And let's do that. Let's adapt that to the film, whatever, or TV show that we're doing. Because, I mean, when you take source material and you want to put it into film, there is a slight adaptation you have to do, because film is different from print. But, just respect the source material and try and, don't change things because arbitrarily. Change them for a reason if you have to, but don't change it just because you want to change it,
Yeah.
That's just me,
Right. I would think a lot of them change it just because they want to show their own, creative brilliance. They think that they can do, a better spin on it than the original guys did.
Yeah.
And so they're just put their mark on it.
Yeah, and see, I just find that that's not me. It's like, no, you shouldn't do that. You should respect the source material and then adapt it with your style, but just adapt it to it, and just, don't try and say, hey, I'm great. Look how much I changed it. I mean, I think it was Frank Miller did The Spirit, and he did this awful version. I was like, oh, man. I mean, if the guy was alive, the original guy who did Spirit, I mean, he would have hated that.
Yeah.
Will Eisner would not have been happy about that.
Yeah.
No. So it's like, just respect what you're working with.
Respect the source material.
Yeah.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Definitely respect the source material.
When I was with Stan at Marvel Productions, we were working with a director who got the right to do the Punisher back in the 80s. Huh. But when he got the rights to it, he didn't like the lead character having a skull on his shirt, so he took the skull off. But the show was still called Punisher. I was like, oh, why? Why?
That doesn't work anymore. It's like there's a movie version of the Punisher where he has the skull on the top of his knife, if I remember right.
Oh, yeah.
And so what they do is they keep focusing in on the top of his knife where you have the little skull, and that's it. He's wearing just a black shirt. I think that's the one with Dolph Lundgren playing the Punisher. I was in the meetings with that, and I was like, why would? Okay, no, that's just what he wanted to do. Right.
Yeah.
If that's what he wants to do, that's what he wants to do.
Yeah, back in basically the 80s and 90s, and Marvel management back in New York, they were mainly worried about making money from licensing. They weren't into ancillaries like toys and apparel. They just wanted to make money licensing their characters out and let someone else do it.
Right.
And it wasn't until like the X-Men series and I think it's Blade. When Blade came out, suddenly it's like, here are two shows that we kind of like. We're trying to do Marvel shows. We were trying to do Marvel movies, and we did shows that respected the original characters. And we kind of showed them, this is what, you could, Marvel, if you guys watch this, I mean, this is like the template that you guys, and luckily they did. They ran with it, and that's what they did. They got the funding to do their first Iron Man from. All you got to do is respect the source material and run with it. There's no reason there's a reason why things work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don, any final questions you want to ask Larry?
Oh, no, I think we covered everything I was hoping to get in and more, actually. So
excellent. I think so, too. So thank you, Larry, for coming on. It's been a fantastic interview. It's been fascinating.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys asked me for this. It's been a pleasure.
And enjoy your much-earned retirement.
Oh, I do every day. Thank you. It is nice to just wake up and just do what you want.
I bet it is. Well, sir, as I said before, you have absolutely earned it. And on that note, thank you everyone for listening, and please tune in for the next episode when we'll talk about something awesome or interview someone almost as good as Larry. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to hear more or join the conversation, come visit us at obeythedna.com. You can also find us on iTunes or whatever fine podcast site forgot to lock their back door. So until next time, remember that to master the nerdly arts takes time, practice, and enough Coca-Cola to drop a rhino. See ya! Come on over and join the conversation at obeythedna.com, where you will find show notes and more.